Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
there's a lot of cool stadiums out there.
The Arlington Heights Bears. The club's potential move to the suburbs is getting serious.
The president is committed to getting both pieces of legislation passed.
Is President Biden's legislative agenda in jeopardy? Our Spotlight Politics team on the latest from Capitol Hill.
A vaccine mandate from the city will come, and we'll make specific announcements in the coming days.
One-on-one with Illinois' top doctor on vaccine mandates, booster shots, COVID variants, and more.
The former head of Chicago Public Schools is raising millions for local college-bound students in her new role.
A new program aims to make investments in Chicago nonprofits more equitable.
Plus, rescued ruins and a virtual tour of a lost masterpiece of Chicago architecture. But first, some of today's top stories. Chicago Public Schools' new CEO officially started the job today. Pedro Martinez kicked off his new position with a visit to Kenwood Academy to talk to students about their first month of the new school year, as seen here in these photos from social media. Martinez says he's thrilled to start supporting the growth of CPS schools, and that starts with hearing directly from students. He also heard from both the American Federation of Teachers Union President Randy Weingarten, who was in town, along with the Chicago Teachers Union leadership. Now, that was during a visit this afternoon at Beadler Elementary in East Garfield Park. Two giants of Chicago media and journalism could be joining forces. Reports from WBEZ, Chicago Public Media, and the Chicago Sun-Times say leadership at each company has confirmed they are in talks of becoming a combined entity, but that the two companies aren't close to any deal. In an email to staff, WBEZ interim CEO Matt Moog said, quote, "The fundamental premise of these talks is about growth and investment and expanding local journalism in Chicago." Neither organization shared any further details about how such a consolidation would work, and the Chicago Public Media Board is scheduled to discuss a proposal at a closed-door meeting tonight. College athletes scored a win today, but not in their respective games. The National Labor Relations Board says college football players and some other athletes in revenue-producing sports are employees of their schools. The decision would allow players at private universities to unionize and negotiate over their working conditions. The NLRB's general counsel also threatened action against schools, conferences, and the NCAA if they continue to use the term, quote, student athlete, which she believes was created to obscure the student's employment relationship with the school. Up next, a new home for the Chicago Bears. Stay with us for more.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
The Chicago Bears have inked a $200 million deal that could have the team leaving behind its longtime home along the city's lakefront for what the team evidently believes would be greener pastures in Arlington Heights. Amanda Vinicky joins us now from outside Soldier Field with a rundown on the action. Amanda, it feels like the horse has left the stable on this deal. What's the latest?
Oh, Paris, yes, the Bears have called Soldier Field here home since the 70s, but you're right that things are really moving fast as they look to possibly move on. The team announcing this morning that they have reached what's called a purchase sale agreement with Churchill Downs, owner of what is now Arlington Racetrack. Horses ran there for the last time on Sunday, so no more horse racing. Now is time for horse trading. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot saying that the Bears canceled a meeting with her yesterday, though owner George McClaskey, she says, did call her yesterday evening with this news. She says both for him and for her, it is just business.
As a mayor, as a Bears fan, I'm going to continue to do what I can to keep them here in the city of Chicago, and I don't think that door has closed by any means. But I also need to make sure that, first and foremost, I'm doing what's best for the taxpayers of the city.
Now, it is not game over for Chicago yet, but Bears president and CEO Ted Phillips says finalizing that PSA was the Bears' next critical step in exploring the potential for the space, though there is a lot of work to be done before the team calls Arlington Heights home and the deal is sealed. Our goal is to chart a path forward that allows our team to thrive on the field, Chicagoland to prosper from this endeavor, and the Bears organization to be ensured a strong future. We will never stop working toward delivering Bears fans the very best experience, Phillips said. Sports Corp President Mark Gannis says everyone knew at the time that the 2003 rehab of Soldier Field wasn't going to cut it long term, and given that the Chicago Park District owns Soldier Field, the team is essentially a tenant and, he says, needs the city's permission to effectively turn the lights on.
The Bears are tenants to the Chicago Park District. The Chicago Park District is subordinated to the city of Chicago and the mayor's office. And it's, it's politically, it's an interesting game of dominoes there. But if and when, which I expect it'll be a when, the Bears build a new stadium in Arlington Park, they will be their own landlords, they will be their own tenants, and they will be able to control their own destiny.
Now, Gannis navigated the sale of the Chicago Cubs to the Ricketts and works with teams on stadium development. He says what the Ricketts have done to Wrigleyville is an example here. He says things like all of the restaurants and Gallagher Field. Now, with its own stadium, he says the Bears could entice fans to stay with also restaurants, a sports book. And with he says the fact that the team wants to do all of this is not Mayor Lightfoot's fault.
Let's recognize that the mayor inherited a fundamentally flawed deal from the outset. So blame for this shouldn't go on Lori Lightfoot. When and if and when, and I do believe it is a when, this ends up happening. At this point, it's really political CYA that's going on.
CYA as in cover your political, behind. He says that if the city were actually serious about keeping the Bears, there would be ongoing talks with, for example, McCormick Place about a lakeside stadium, a new one. But he says there has not been any scuttlebutt that he has heard about that. Now, to that end, Mayor Lightfoot today says that there is no good in rehashing the 20-year-old daily deal, but she says that the city does have options, and she's formed a team to look into them. But she reiterated in order to explore them, the Bears need to come to the table.
The bottom line is they got to come to the table if they're serious about trying to do something for the remainder of their time at Soldier Field. But stepping back from the Bears, we've got an incredible asset on our lakefront. And if you think about the lakefront from the shed down to McCormick Place, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. But I don't think that we are nearly maximizing the opportunity that we can and we should.
Now, Mayor Lightfoot is a Bear season ticket holder, and she says that, yes, Soldier Field could stand to have better beer and food. She does not want, however, to be the mayor wearing the jacket for losing the Bears to the Burbs. But University of Chicago sports economist Alan Sanderson says that would not be a huge economic hit for the city.
There are two things that you do not want to put on a valuable piece of real estate. One is a cemetery, and the other one is a football stadium. Now, they're both closed all the time. So most of the revenue for the Bears or any other NFL team is television. You could play in the middle of Iowa in a cornfield, and it wouldn't make a whole lot of difference to the team's revenues.
Sorry. Now, however, Arlington Heights is considering it a major score, and you have a statement from the mayor saying as much. The mayor of Arlington Heights saying that, yes, this deal still has a lot underway as he speaks with the community and the team negotiates, but he also appeared to give it his blessing, saying that he's committed to working with the Bears and to other stakeholders, and that he considers this an opportunity for the northwest suburbs. My goal for any redevelopment has always been to put this prime piece of real estate to its highest and best use, and I can't think of a higher and better use than this one, he said in a statement. Now, at least one longtime resident of Arlington Heights that we caught up with is likewise on board.
That would be awesome. I'm happy about it. I'd rather see that than another mall or something go in there. I think it would be a lot of fun.
Now, Bears fans haven't had much to cheer about lately with that brutal loss to the Browns, especially on Sunday. And asked about all of this today, Bears coach Matt Nagy said that winning is his focus, not stadiums.
I'm so dug into that whatever is going on and everything on the outside with that. That would be more for Ted Phillips, but that's not something that I'm so entrenched in this game plan right now that's not something where I'm at.
Now, back in June, when all of this talk first came about, Mayor Lightfoot seemed to say that the Bears were just bluffing, and she said the team should instead focus on making it to October. Now, she clearly didn't mean it in this fashion, but she is, in a sense, getting her wish, because with this purchase agreement, the Bears have very much guaranteed that their future, no matter what their record, will be a major point of discussion in Chicago this fall. Now, earlier today, she said that she does not have on her calendar any future meetings set with Bears management or ownership. And again, repeatedly said that she's interested in hearing what the Bears want, what their wish list is, but in order to do so, they need to come to the table. Now, wherever the team does call home, stadium-wise, she says that she is confident they will remain the Chicago Bears. And don't forget, we will be exploring more of this in our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series when my colleague Joanna Hernandez goes live from Arlington Heights tomorrow. With that, here from Soldier Field, Paris, back to you.
Thanks, Amanda. Flu season is right around the corner, and new COVID-19 variants are expected to emerge in the coming months. This as more Illinoisans become eligible to receive booster shots and as the FDA considers full approval for the vaccine for children ages 5 to 11. And joining us to discuss the latest COVID-19 developments is Dr. Ngozi Ezike, Director of the Illinois Department of Public Health. Dr. Ezike, thanks for joining us as always.
Thanks so much for having me.
So as we mentioned, flu season is coming. There are other seasonal viruses that are showing up right now. Are you worried about a bump in cases and a potential co-pandemic as we head to the colder indoor months?
That's always been a concern. Of course, last year we were very fortunate. There was essentially no flu season. We don't know that will be the case this year. And so, of course, we have our flu shot that is out there. And the good thing is that you can get your flu shot and your COVID shot at the same time. They can be co-administered, so you don't have to have two separate visits for the first of each, and then follow up with either maybe a second dose if you get an mRNA vaccine. But absolutely, we want to avoid a possible twin-demic, if you will, of flu and COVID by making sure that we get fully vaccinated for both as soon as possible.
And speaking of those vaccines, a booster shot has been approved. Who do you recommend the booster shot to in Illinois? And what do you think the demand will be?
Yeah, so we have already seen some people proceeding to get that third or that booster shot. Of course, the immunocompromised, that was already put out there about a month ago for anyone who fits into that immunocompromised category to get the third dose in the series. But now, with the recent CDC announcement last week, we see the highest risk category that should absolutely pursue getting this booster are individuals over the age of 65 who started off with that Pfizer series, and long-term care residents. Those individuals should absolutely, 6 months after their initial Pfizer series, get that booster. As well, people who are slightly younger than that, not quite seniors, up to age 64, 50 to 64, but you have those serious underlying medical conditions, which we have seen portend a worse course with COVID. We recommend strongly to get that booster as well. And so those are the groups. Absolutely, you should get that booster 6 months after the Pfizer series. And then the rest is more, assessing your individual risk. And then after that, if you're in a high risk setting where you think you're constantly exposed to the virus, constantly exposed to many people, maybe many of whom are not vaccinated, then you might say because of your setting that you want to get the vaccine. Or you could just say that, I'm not 50 years old, but, I'm an adult that does have a significant medical condition. And because of the risk associated with that condition, I want to take advantage of the booster as well. So again, a lot of individual choice and risk stratification for individuals is at play in this case.
Speaking of unvaccinated, Pfizer has submitted data to the FDA showing apparently that the vaccine is safe and effective for children 5 to 11. Approval could come in the next month or so. Would you be in favor of vaccine mandates for public school children once this is approved?
I think probably we might see an emergency use authorization before the full approval. Again, we are really working on, keeping the healthcare resources fully available, and like some places where we're seeing problems like in Southern Illinois. So I think if we can really, first priority is those adults to be fully vaccinated. Fortunately, kids aren't the ones that are hardest hit with COVID, but of course we want to encourage vaccination. Vaccinations are a fantastic modern health technological aid that really helps prevent sickness, prevents death. And so we want to encourage it for everyone. I don't see that mandates will be happening, for this school year, but I think that people will just do the right thing and pursue that vaccination as we see how it helps curb this pandemic.
Speaking of schools, Dr. Ezike, there's some concern in CPS of mini outbreaks. Your own department has data showing that 2,000 young children have reported COVID-19. Are you confident in the mitigation and the monitoring efforts of CPS and other school districts to manage these little outbreaks?
Yeah, I think we all know the tools that will help us best manage these outbreaks. We know that you have to have a combination of vaccination, masking, and then testing, and the contact tracing. And I know that all of our school districts are working with our local health departments, to get this important work done. We are learning, there are articles that came out just last week about how masking has significantly decreased the number of outbreaks in schools that had mask optional versus mask mandatory. We have seen that divide in terms of where more outbreaks have happened. And so I think following the guidelines that we've been preaching for quite a while now, we can keep those outbreaks to a minimum and keep that school environment safe for in-person learning.
Well, as you know, here in Chicago, Mayor Lori Lightfoot has given the green light for a citywide vaccine mandate, regardless of some resistance from union groups. Let's take a listen to what the mayor had to say recently.
We absolutely have to have a vaccine mandate. It's for the safety of all involved, particularly members of the public who are interacting with city employees on a daily basis. It's important for colleagues to also feel like they have a workplace that is safe. So a vaccine mandate from the city will come, and we'll make specific announcements in the coming days.
Dr. Ezike, you've seen in New York, tens of thousands of healthcare workers refused to take vaccines before the mandate went into effect. Do you see any kind of resistance like this in Illinois?
We always hear from that vocal minority. The truth is the majority of Americans actually support mandates, and I even before they started rolling out, and the majority of healthcare workers, of all these different sectors, teachers, support getting vaccinated and know that this is the way to protect our work environments. And so I know that we'll get some pushback, and of course you're never going to have 100% consensus on any issue. So of course there are going to be people who will push back, but I think the majority of the people are on board and in line, and we are going to get lots of people vaccinated because that's the way we get out of this pandemic.
All right, Dr. Ngozi Ezike, we thank you as always for taking some time out and joining us. Thank you so much. And out of Brandis, and a former Chicago Public Schools CEO on her next move. Brandis.
In Paris, after more than 3 years as CEO of Chicago Public Schools, Janice Jackson is now turning her focus to college access as the head of a scholarship organization to provide funding and support to college-bound Chicago students and their families. Organizers say the goal of Hope Chicago is to, quote, raise, invest, and deploy $1 billion in scholarships and aid over the next 10 years. Joining us to discuss this new educational endeavor in her first television interview about this is Janice Jackson, CEO of Hope Chicago and former CEO of Chicago Public Schools. Janice, welcome back. It's been a little while.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Of course. First, what is Hope Chicago and how does this scholarship program work?
Yeah, Hope Chicago is a 2-generation scholarship program. So our goal, as you stated at the top of this, is to raise and deploy $1 billion over the next 10 years to CPS students as well as their parents, to give those parents an opportunity to go back to school if they've started and need to complete, or to start school, because we know many of them put their hopes and dreams on hold when they start new families. And so we're excited about this program because the goal is to really disrupt a troubling pattern of students going to college and graduating with crushing debt. And unfortunately, more CPS students still don't complete college once they transition, and they're leaving with debt. And so this is a huge issue, and I'm super excited that we're going to be solving this by bringing together the collective force and resources here in Chicago through Hope Chicago.
So the intent to help students avoid taking on being saddled with a boatload of loans once they've completed their degrees. How is the organization partnering with universities as well as Chicago Public Schools?
Yeah, well, Chicago Public Schools is our most important partner. People know everything about it. Public education in the city is near and dear to my heart. But the colleges in the state of Illinois have been incredibly open to this opportunity, and the response has been overwhelmingly positive. This is what we're asking. We're asking that colleges partner with us, that we work on tuition to make it accessible for our students, but that they also put in programming that allows for our students to not only get to college, but to complete college successfully. When we look at the data, most CPS students in 9th grade say that almost all say that they want to go to college. Something happens between that time and the end of senior year. We have to change that, and we know that it requires the district to do more, but we also need our post-secondary institutions in the state to do more.
And speaking of CPS, you've clearly been in touch with incoming brand new CPS CEO Pedro Martinez, whose first day on the job was today, as we mentioned. Quick sidebar, what advice have you given him?
Well, I've given him a lot of advice, but I should say Pedro is the pro, and I couldn't be more thrilled to have him at the helm. I mean, I've been working on this, which I'm super excited about, but to know that CPS is in good hands, to know that somebody from the district, from the city is leading, is going to bring about the kind of stability that I think people enjoyed underneath my tenure. And so as a parent of a CPS student, it makes me feel comfortable or comforted that someone's leading that's going to be here for a while, take us to the next level. Because this pandemic has been challenging for everybody, and we really needed leadership. And so I'm grateful for Pedro for taking on this role.
Now, you've already seeded $20 million to get this started, but as you said, you've got a goal of $1 billion over 10 years. It's a lot of money. How do you plan to raise that?
It is. You know what, when we talked a lot about this goal, and it is eye-popping, and it's eye-popping for a reason. It really reflects the magnitude of the problem. When we look at college debt, it has risen exponentially in the past 10 years. It's out of control. So the amount of money that it costs to go to school has grown exponentially, but the support through Pell and MAP and other resources hasn't grown at the same level. And so that's also a big part of this raise. We're going to start with the philanthropic community, the corporate community, which has already stepped up with our 2 seed donors, but we also plan to work with our partners at the state and federal level to see more Pell and MAP for our students. That $1 billion goal is about closing the gap for CPS students, period. And right now that gap is about $940 million.
And what is the impact then? How many students over time can you reach?
If we're successful, and I have every reason to believe we will be, we're going to reach about 70,000 CPS students over the next 10 years. And we're going to the students that will be direct recipients is at about 20,000. The place where I'm most excited is this 2-generation model where we bring in the parents and allow them to go back to a 2-year, 4-year, or even a trade program. We estimate that about 7,000 to 8,000 parents are going to take us up on that offer. And judging by the response to today's announcement, we may even exceed that goal. So I'll be happy to come back and talk about what we're seeing and what we're learning. But we think that this is an incredibly important program if we're really serious about increasing opportunity, reducing violence, and really improving the quality of life, especially for our residents on the south and the west side of Chicago.
And really quick before we let you go, Janice, next steps, how do we know which CPS schools you're going to be working with to begin?
Yeah. I would love to work with every school. We're not in that position. And so, you know me, equity is at the core of everything I do. I'll be making an announcement in the next couple of months of the schools that we're going to start with. We are starting in the communities of most need. We're starting where the leadership is there at the principal and the counseling team level to get our kids to and through. And so stay tuned. I'll be sharing that information in the coming months.
Sounds like an exciting opportunity. Janice Jackson, thanks for joining us and best of luck in your next endeavor.
All right. Thanks, Brandis.
Up next, salvaged artifacts and a virtual recreation of a long-departed theater in Chicago. Stay with us.
I come from a people that not only found a way to survive through the most horrific circumstances, but they thrived.
I could not save one of the boys of color in my own life. If my family could be exposed to this horror, then really it could happen to anyone. We are truly all in this together.
There's much more ahead on the program, including whether President Joe Biden's legislative agenda hangs in the balance. Our Spotlight Politics team will weigh in on that and much more, including more on that potential Bears deal. But first, 2 lost works by architects Louis Sullivan and Frank Lloyd Wright share the spotlight in a new dual exhibition. Chicago Tonight spoke with the city's cultural historian and a noted artist who are part of a team exploring a long-lost theater and more. Producer Mark Vitale has the story.
Salvaged ornaments, documentary photos, and immersive digital animations bring to life the Garrick Theater, a lost masterpiece of Chicago architecture. The Garrick opened as the Schiller Theater Building in 1892, 1 year before the Chicago World's Fair. The early skyscraper at 64 West Randolph Street was designed by Louis Sullivan and Dankmar Adler.
In creating the show, certainly there's going to be interest from the people who really are into architecture and architectural history. But we really wanted to tell more of a broad story. It's almost like the building is a living thing.
This entire show is an attempt to recreate a feeling of a building in the same way that you get a feeling from a person, and to realize what's really lost when that person or that building is gone.
To say a building is a living thing is not really off base, because part of what Sullivan tried to create were buildings that were a living thing and something like an extension of nature, of beauty that will hit you here and will hit you here.
Before the Garrick closed in 1960, Tim Samuelson visited the theater when he was 8 years old.
I was interested in these buildings when I was just a little kid. And I remember to this day walking into that auditorium, into this wonderful kind of almost narrow space, and it rose up and it arched to the center of it. And I was mesmerized. But when the lights went down, you could look around and see these spaces unfolding everywhere. And that stuck with me to this day.
Recent neurological research shows that we actually have mapping neurons that create electrical impulses and actual shapes of buildings within our minds. As we get to know a building, we actually have little tiny models of reality and of buildings and spaces that we frequent in our brains, and they affect our memories and our experiences of the world. So I tried to put a little bit of that into the show, if that doesn't sound completely insane.
The building fragments come from salvage efforts by the late photographer and preservationist Richard Nickel. Nickel famously and tragically died in 1972 when a portion of the old Chicago Stock Exchange collapsed on him.
Of the original objects in this exhibit, every one of them came from Richard Nickel himself or was part of the salvage effort, which he led with John Vinci, David Norris. These were the team that were actually chipping these things out of the building. Most of the pieces that we have in here that are original came from something that Richard Nickel had. In fact, Richard Nickel, when he was alive, he realized my interest in architecture in these buildings, and he gave me many of them.
In this two-part exhibition, a separate gallery looks at the life and death of Frank Lloyd Wright's Larkin Administration Building in Buffalo, New York. The innovative open spaces at the Larkin Building brought harmonious design to a small army of workers at the mail-order soap company.
What you have here is the story of two buildings, and they both share being created by architects who are passionate about creating buildings that were of beauty, utility, and ones that would impact you in the heart in your experience, just like you'd experience something in nature.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
The Garrick Theater was demolished for a parking garage. The Larkin Building was razed for a truck stop that was never built. The show is called Romanticism to Ruin, Two Lost Works of Sullivan and Wright. It's at the Wrightwood 659 Gallery in Lincoln Park until November 27th. Beautiful looking theater there. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, research shows black and brown-led nonprofits receive less funding than their white counterparts. Why the disparity exists and what's being done to change it.
The Bears are making a business decision with that purchase. We'll see what unfolds there.
And our Spotlight Politics team breaks down the political ramifications of the Bears' possible move out of the city. But first, some more of today's top stories. 11th hour meetings on Capitol Hill today to try and stave off a government shutdown and to pass President Joe Biden's economic agenda. Congress has until tomorrow night to pass a stopgap funding measure to fund government or else risk a shutdown of all non-essential government services. Multiple reports on the Hill say President Biden, as well as Senate and House Democratic leaders, have held meetings today on that and the president's infrastructure and $3.5 trillion spending bill. Now, divisions within the Democratic caucus remain on those latter items, and we'll have more on these negotiations in Spotlight Politics. More apparent counterfeit COVID vaccine cards have landed at O'Hare. For the second time in less than a month, U.S. Customs and Border Protection patrols seized packages containing the fake cards coming from overseas. Officials say they can tell the cards are fraudulent because of the low-quality appearance and other discrepancies. Customs officials previously announced that 19 counterfeit vaccination cards had been recovered at O'Hare from inside a parcel that was headed to an address in Ohio. And the feds announced charges against former U.S. Postal Service employees for an alleged scheme to steal credit cards from the mail. The U.S. Attorney's Office announced the charges today as part of an ongoing federal probe called Operation Cash on Delivery. According to this alleged scheme, multiple former mail carriers stole credit cards from the mail and exchanged them for cash or other items. The charges allege the employees unlawfully obtained customers' personal information like social security numbers to activate the cards. And now we go back to Brandis and an effort to make investments in Chicago nonprofits more equitable. Brandis.
Paris, research shows black and brown-led nonprofits receive less funding than their white counterparts. An analysis of grant applications by Echoing Green and the Bridge Span Group found that, on average, black-led organizations saw revenues 24% less than their white counterparts. Meanwhile, black-led organizations' unrestricted net assets were 76% less. But now a new program by the United Way of Metro Chicago is working to address this disparity. Joining us to discuss the program and the impact inequitable funding can have are Sean Garrett, CEO and president of United Way of Metro Chicago; Edwin Martinez, co-founder of Centro Sanar, also an equity fund recipient that provides free mental health resources to residents on the Southwest Side; and Messiah Equiano, Executive Director of Shy Rise, an equity fund recipient that works to share positive stories in Chicago. Gentlemen, welcome to Chicago Tonight. So let's talk a little bit about this program. It will provide support to the organizations in 3 ways. It'll give them $50,000 of unrestricted funds over a period of 2 years. Leaders will also receive support from DePaul's nonprofit management program, and they'll be connected with corporate partners and foundation leaders. Sean, let's start with you, please. How does this program begin to address the disparities we mentioned earlier?
Yeah, no, thanks for having us here tonight. And, there's been a lot of discussions about, challenges of getting funding to businesses on the south and west sides of Chicago, Black and brown-led organizations. But we know the same thing is true for nonprofits. Yet these organizations are incredible organizations that are delivering services. They're economic engines. They're really driving change that we want to see. And so our goal through this program, and we're so grateful that People's Gas has really stepped in to be a founder and help galvanize corporate support behind it, is to connect and shine a spotlight on the great work that these organizations are doing, and get them the access to the corporate funding as well as the philanthropic funding that they deserve. They're doing the great work. The point is, how do we then provide the spotlight so that they can get the catalytic resources that they need to grow and expand their services and really help change neighborhoods throughout our region?
Messiah, your organization, Shy Rise, it is part of this grant program. Briefly tell us about Shy Rise and the impact that you have on the communities you serve.
First off, thank you for having us. Sean, thank you all for your support and the United Way. Shy Rise is a not-for-profit that operates with a mission of saving and enhancing and inspiring the lives of Chicagoans in as many communities as we possibly can. We've done that through mentorship programs, through scholarships, through life-changing media productions, through block parties, any and every way we possibly can, from the south to the west side, even to the north side, as many locations as we can in Chicago to inspire Chicago's residents and turn the horrific term of Chirac around and make it forever Shy Rise. That's our goal.
Yeah, and as you were speaking, we were looking at a few photos of some kids with face painting at what I believe to be some of those block parties that you mentioned. Edwin, Centro Sonar is also a part of this grant program, so briefly tell us about the work that you do and the impact that you've had. You started in March 2020.
Yeah, we started right in the middle of the pandemic, actually, right when it started. So mental health has been exacerbated, especially during the pandemic, right? But we've been dealing with the pandemic before the pandemic, which is, violence throughout the city of Chicago. So Centro Sonar fits a niche within providing free, culturally tuned, high-quality mental health services within community-based settings. So we're really tapping into addressing access to mental health resources, especially on the southwest side, given the systemic disinvestment that's been occurring as well. So within this short period of time, being volunteers to being able to hire 9 staff, we've been able to, especially within this year, we've been able to provide 243 individuals on the southwest side mental health services for free and invest within our staff as well. So providing dialectical behavioral therapy, EMDR, trauma somatic therapy services for folks that have complex trauma, which is the majority of the population that we see.
Absolutely. Sean, has the United Way seen disparities in its own philanthropic investments?
We have. We started this process by first looking at our own funding. And, our funding, while more diverse of a portfolio than the stats that were referenced, wasn't where it needed to be. And so we took the steps right away to listen to our partners. We have what we call neighborhood networks in 6 neighborhoods in the city and 4 in the suburbs. These are community-based networks and coalitions that really are the eyes and ears of a community. And we asked them, who's doing great work in this community? And they were the ones who nominated the 10 organizations that are part of this initial cohort. And it really comes from the community. It's listening to the community and saying, how do we take our resources and invest in these kinds of leaders to make sure that we're having a different outcome in the future?
Messiah, what are some of the challenges that you faced when it comes to accessing funding for the work you do?
One, just being a part of the community, the knowers of opportunities. I think that's huge, just to even know that opportunities are out there and they exist. And then 2, I am a professional writer. I'm a playwright, filmmaker, screenwriter. I've been able to be blessed and fortunate to know how to put words together, but I know a ton of organizations and organizational leaders that are very deserving, but they may not know how to fill out an application, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are doing important work in the community. So those are just a few. We can go on on about the different challenges that present funding, that are presented in funding. But those are definitely two, just knowing that those opportunities are out there, and then two, being able to access them and then execute them successfully.
Sounds like a matter of connections and, of course, knowing how to tell your story. Edwin, several months after you all started the organization, you secured $500,000 in funding. What are some of the challenges that you all have had at Centro Sonar as a smaller organization trying to access grant funding?
Yeah, as I took to pick back up on Messiah as well, like the issues around access. So some of the biggest issues that we have is and this is why we were really excited to have United Way, especially with the undersecured funding, is to be able to compete with larger organizations regarding larger grants. So a good portion of our money, of course, our budget is based on reimbursements. As small nonprofits, being able to expend money or have money to be able to pay staff and be reimbursed afterwards, either monthly or quarterly, is a big expense and big tall ask for smaller nonprofits. So being able to compete but also access and retain that funding through reimbursements is a huge support for us as well. That's been one of the major challenges as far as Centro Sonar as well.
And Sean, what can foundations, philanthropists, what should they be doing to help eliminate some of these barriers and diversify the organizations that they fund?
So the good thing here in Chicago is there's a lot of discussion about this topic, and there's a number of great organizations that are really looking about what they can do differently. You know, People's Gas stepping up and saying, we want to be a part of this. A number of other companies have said, we want to be a part of it. But the thing we keep encouraging people to do is to listen to the community. The community knows who is serving them. The neighborhoods and the leaders in neighborhoods are telling you, these are the folks we trust, and here's who we work with. And we have seen that over the last 18 months in the pandemic, how important hyper-local, community-based neighborhood organizations can be, and the impact that they can have. And so what we really encourage everyone to do is come to the table. Come to the table and listen. Come to the table and learn about these incredible organizations. We plan on using our spotlight to be able to ensure that they get this attention, but we encourage others to do the same exact thing.
Okay, and I'm sure more to come as we watch organizations like Centro Sonar and Shy Rise and others continue to grow. Thanks to our guests, Sean Garrett, Messiah Equiano, and Edwin Martinez for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Up next, our Spotlight Politics team on the Obama Presidential Center breaking ground and much more. But first, a look at the weather. With the Bears possibly saying so long to historic Soldier Field, there may be political consequences for the mayor. Our Spotlight Politics team takes a deep dive on this and much more. Welcome back, Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharoon, and Paris Schutz. So, as we heard earlier, Mayor Lightfoot had a lot to say about the Bears moving to Arlington Heights and the future of Soldier Field. Here she is again.
The venue is a very well sought after venue. We've already got a waiting list for opportunities for 2022. So I'm very bullish about what the future holds for Soldier Field. I hope the Bears are part of it, but I have a responsibility to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to maximize and catalyze that asset.
So Heather, could this be a political blow for Mayor Lightfoot? Is she going to go down in history as the mayor who lost the Bears to the Burbs?
Absolutely. People have a real attachment to the Bears. Chicago might be a divided baseball town, but a lot of people love the Bears, and they have loved the Bears for a long time, which is really, the team has sort of really embodied that working class, salt of the earth, Chicago self-image that the city likes to have. I also think it's a little bit interesting that the Bears say that the deal in Arlington Heights could close as early as late 2022 or early 2023. If Mayor Lightfoot seeks a second term, she will be on a ballot in February 2023, which almost promises that headlines about the Bears' looming departure, if it is finalized, would be front and center for a lot of people, which could make convincing people to give her another 4 years in office difficult, to say the least.
Paris, is this another example of how the mayor handles managing relationships?
Well, I don't think the mayor did herself or the city any favors by that initial reaction saying the Bears ought to focus on being relevant past October and beating the Packers. Obviously, the tone now is different, but it almost feels like, as Heather said, this won't close for at least another year, but it kind of feels like it's a done deal, even though it's not. And some folks I spoke to today around this said there's almost nothing the mayor could have done other than preempting any talk of Arlington Heights and having a team go to the Bears and say, look, we get it, Soldier Field is not comparable to these new NFL stadiums, and you can't make it such, as Mark Gannis said. So let's talk about a big, giant piece of land here, like the 78, or like Michael Reese, or like near McCormick Place, that you can build a giant dome and all these developments that you want to see, because it just doesn't look like it's going to be able to happen at Soldier Field. And according to everyone I talked to, and Mark Gannis you heard, it just feels like this is too late.
And Amanda, you're still at Soldier Field, but would the state kick in for a new stadium in Arlington Heights?
Well, yeah, because that's another B word that we did not talk about, and that is the billions of dollars that it will cost to move the Bears to. Oh, there we go. That it will. That is the billions of dollars that it will cost the Bears to build this new stadium. And so, yes, the question is, will they do that on their own? I mean, it is not as if the Bears owners have been, the McCaskies have been known to be great spenders here in any way or liking to go into debt. So that is certainly a question. Will they ask the state? But of course they will be asking the state for money. Is there any appetite, particularly after a pandemic when people are really hurting in their own pockets? It doesn't matter if you're a great fan of the Bears, you want to go and watch them, you're already maybe complaining about ticket prices, not necessarily wanting your money to go toward a new stadium. So I think that it is going to be very difficult to get anything like that through the General Assembly at this point, save for, by the way, any potential support for, some roads, capital infrastructure, that sort of thing. That's typical.
And Paris, you're a season ticket holder, but, just speaking about the politics as well, could the city's Park District Commissioner, since the Park District owns Soldier Field, is he going to take any heat for this as well?
Well, given those WBEZ reports about those emails, sure he could. He might really be on the hot seat, and if Mayor Lightfoot is in political trouble, he knows this full well. He could be a fall guy where his job might be in trouble. But, all of this kind of puts a new light on the deal to renovate Soldier Field that taxpayers will be paying for till 2033, no matter if the team plays there or not. And it's going to cost, after debt and interest, about $1 billion. So here's what we got for this deal back in 2020 or 2001. The small stadium in the NFL, a loss of that historic landmark status, a stadium where you can't have a Super Bowl or NCAA. So as Mark Gannis said, this was kind of a bum deal now that the Bears want out, and the stadium really isn't comparable to these new NFL stadiums. And I want to make one other point. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when the Bears talked about going to Gary, Planet Park was the proposal, or Elk Grove Village, they almost had no leverage because the fans were like, no, you can't take the Bears away from the lakefront. But what I hear today in sports talk radio and social media is, it kind of makes sense that the Bears would go to Arlington Heights to build this new development because they know what's happened in LA, a big, beautiful stadium, in Las Vegas, and perhaps there isn't that nostalgic connection to this Soldier Field because it's not the same Soldier Field that you sat and watched the '85 Bears in under the colonnades. So it's a very different atmosphere now where I think the Bears do not risk losing fans or getting bad PR by moving away.
And it is not uncommon in the NFL for a football team to have the name of the Kansas City Chiefs or the New York Giants and actually be outside the city. The Giants play in Jersey.
They play in New Jersey. San Francisco 49ers play in Santa Clara, which is like 45 miles south of San Francisco. It's hard to get there from San Francisco. So, no, none of this is unprecedented at all.
Okay, so moving on.
Paris, you touched on it. I mean, getting to Arlington Heights would be easier. And I think that is something else that we haven't really touched on. The transportation and the difficulties in getting to Soldier Field on game day and a frustration with that, which, again, is why fans, in some anyway, are on board with
one more thing. As a season ticket holder, it's a good place to watch a game. The seats are good. It's a good atmosphere, good home field advantage. The sight lines are really good. So there's nothing wrong with it from a fan perspective. It's just that it's clear in the NFL today that there's nothing you can do to Soldier Field to make it comparable to these gleaming palaces that have just been built.
Okay, moving on. President Obama was in town yesterday to break ground on his presidential center. Here's why he said he chose that location.
It is surrounded by vibrant neighborhoods and a community where we believe we can help make a difference. Jackson Park also happens to hold a special place in my heart because it was literally my entryway into Chicago.
Now, Heather, they had a bit of a limited audience at a pretty audacious event yesterday.
So 2 things were happening. One, there is still a pandemic going on. President Obama took a lot of heat for scheduling a big birthday bash on Martha's Vineyard earlier this summer, and I am sure that they did not want the optics of sort of a big dog and pony show while people are still dying every day from COVID-19. Also, this location, Jackson Park, is still very controversial. There's a pending lawsuit, and a lot of people were very upset to see the work start at Jackson Park by tearing down literally hundreds of trees that will be replaced, but that was really hard for people to see. So it had a dual benefit, although it did serve to sort of mute the celebration of what Mayor Lightfoot and Governor Pritzker are really hoping serves as a catalyst for not just Woodlawn and South Shore, but really the entire South Side, which has faced decades of disinvestment and, of course, all of the societal ills that go along with that.
Amanda, Heather just mentioned this, but there's still a legal challenge from Protect Our Parks, correct?
Yes, Protect Our Parks is trying to move forward on 3 fronts, despite already really getting rejected by the U.S. Supreme Court. Trying again, they were frustrated that yesterday's event, albeit this smaller, more scaled down one, went forward. They questioned, why all the pomp when, in fact, there are still these legal challenges. It seems as if the city, the Obama, is not all that worried about that. And just briefly, I will add, since I was there, it was a bit strange. I counted only, 16 individuals actually seated, the dignitaries who had invitations to be there. There were, roughly that much media. And so you had, the former president of the United States, known for his oratory skills, giving one of those classic inspirational speeches, and there was muted applause, not because the people in attendance weren't excited, but because there were so few of them in this huge empty space. And then also briefly, just to put in mind the scale of this Arlington Heights potential Bears arena, that's, how many acres that is versus the 20 acres that the Obama Presidential Library is going to receive. This is a huge, huge space that the Bears would be taking over in Arlington Heights.
It's the size of the
that's
loop.
just worthy of pointing out in terms of what can happen there.
It's about the same size as the loop.
Yeah, so that's for comparison, everybody, for those of you playing along at home. So moving on to politics, more politics. Former Alderman Ricardo Munoz pleads guilty to using campaign funds for personal use. Heather, remind us who he is and his tenure to the city council. What are these federal charges that he's pleading to?
Well, Alderman Munoz represented the 22nd Ward, which includes Little Village, for nearly 25 years. He did not run for re-election in 2019. And by the time he left office, this sort of issue with the campaign funds with the Progressive Caucus was known. And this week, he pled guilty. He acknowledged that he took $16,000 from the campaign fund, used it to pay a relative's tuition, and could be sentenced to between 10 and 16 months in prison. It will be up to a judge to issue that final sentence shortly after the first of the year. And it really caps off what was really a decades-long career in Little Village as one of the first Latinos to rise to real political power on the city council. He led the Progressive Caucus at one point, and he was somebody that a lot of other aldermen looked to sort of lead the progressive push against Mayor Rahm Emanuel while he was in office.
And before we go, a little bit of national news. President Biden was scheduled to be in Chicago today to tout United Airlines' COVID vaccine mandate, but canceled that trip so that he could keep working on negotiations on Capitol Hill. Heather, back to you. What kind of message does that send with that visit? Because United Airlines is set to fire several hundred employees for not getting that COVID vaccine.
Right, but that's just about 1% or even less of their total workforce. And I think it tells you a little bit about how difficult things are on Capitol Hill for the president right now, that the easiest thing for him right now is imposing vaccine mandates on both the Department of Defense employees, which now have a more than 90% vaccination rate, than trying to get his infrastructure bills through both the House and the Senate. And that took priority this week. I know that several aldermen are hopeful that the president comes back and helps push vaccine mandates. The city employee vaccine mandate is supposed to take effect October 15th, which means city employees have to get their final dose of the vaccine by Friday.
And Paris, in just, these 20 seconds, are Democrats from both ends of the spectrum, are they dooming the president's promises here, his priorities?
Well, it just comes down to what it's always come down to is the Democratic caucus are going it alone on the $4+ billion of infrastructure plus Build Back Better, and they have to fund the government to keep it open and the debt ceiling, and the divide is between more moderate Democrats and progressive Democrats. More specifically, it's still coming down to those two senators, Sinema from Arizona and Manchin from West Virginia, and Manchin saying it just doesn't look like he wants to support that $3.5 trillion proposal. Progressives saying that's what it is. We need the climate stuff in there. We need it to be that much money. It doesn't seem to me any deal emerging quite yet, and they have to do it soon.
So, yeah, this should be fun to watch this week, again, for those playing along at home. Thanks to our Spotlight Politics team, Heather Sharon, Amanda Vinicky, and Paris Schutz. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
And you can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. We visit what could be the Bears' new home, Arlington Heights, as part of our In Your Neighborhood series.
And the vision for redeveloping 12 acres of vacant prime real estate on the far south side. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.